You know, it's been a while since I checked in on the Sonic community. Let's see what they're up to. Oh my god. Well, I'm never checking in on those guys ever again. Let's just stick to the games. You know, the consequences of a blue hedgehog running fast on Sega Genesis in 1991 needs to be studied.
Anyway, every franchise has those games that are considered special or even perfect to some. Mario is Mario 64 and Mario Galaxy, Zelda is Ocarina of Time, and Sonic has the 2 adventure titles. Our focus today is on one of the 2 adventure titles. Titles historically considered by most Sonic fans to be some of the franchise's best 3D titles ever. I used to subscribe to this train of thought as well. In fact, I put Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 up there with some of my favorite titles like Sonic Generations and Shadow Generations. Recently, I went through and played through Sonic Adventure 1 on Dreamcast again for my Retro Achievements profile, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. However, it reminded me of something. Last time I played Sonic Adventure 2, it was on the GameCube. I remember loving the Sonic and Shadow levels, but upon reflecting on replaying the treasure hunting and mech levels, I suddenly wasn't as eager to fire it up anymore. This begged me to ponder, is Sonic Adventure 2 as good as everyone says? I mean, there's gotta be a reason that when most people talk about Sonic Adventure 2, they usually talk about the music and speed levels. In fact, whenever I see people talk about Sonic Adventure 2, one of the first things mentioned is that the treasure hunting stages broke the radar and that the mech levels are audio overload. Today, we're looking at this purely from the perspective of playing the main game, as well as a little bit of the Chow Garden. I'm writing this intro before replaying the game, so as of now, no concrete opinions have been reformed, so let's dive in and figure out if Sonic Adventure 2 is actually good or not. Now then, when playing any game, you often need to pick the version that you want to play. Upon doing some research, although most people say that SA2 on Dreamcast looks better, the expanded Chow Garden alone is enough for me to jump over to the GameCube version. Let's also be honest, if any of you are trying to buy a copy of the game, the GameCube version is shockingly the much easier pill to swallow, so moving forward, that's the version of the game we're going to be using. I also didn't own a copy of the Dreamcast version until my 24th birthday last year, so I just have far more experience with the GameCube version. That being said though, the Dreamcast version is my preferred version, simply because I have sold my soul to that console and I will sing its praises until the day that I die.
Long live the Dreamcast, baby!
Anyway, finally in the game, and we get started as expected, Sonic breaking out of a helicopter after being arrested and plummeting down onto the streets of City Escape. City Escape is a classic Sonic level with high speeds and nice set pieces to boot on a colorful level. Escaping the gun truck is iconic and comes back in Sonic Generations due to how iconic it is. The intro of this level alone though kinda makes me see why he's been arrested. Story conflicts aside, Sonic is undoubtedly causing hundreds of thousands of dollars in property damage. Then again, the government is also probably guilty of millions in property damage if this truck slamming into a building is anything to go off of. Regardless of the collateral damage, this game has some of the best 3D Sonic action in these levels the franchise has to offer. When you're playing well, the game flows so naturally and it feels like Sonic is just tearing through these stages with acrobatic grace. The speed levels more than ever feel super skill based, and it's incredibly satisfying to get better at these levels, especially City Escape, Metal Harbor, and Final Rush. After a pretty big nothing burger of a boss fight that's just meant to show how the US government is mistaking Shadow for Sonic, we move right on into Wild Canyon with Knuckles. As the first treasure hunting level, it's not bad at all, but it shows off a pretty big gripe most people have. Earlier I said how people mention how this game broke the radar for Knuckles in comparison to SA1. Well, that's because the radar no longer shows off your proximity to all 3 collectibles, rather only one at a time. You can still collect the pieces out of order, but why the hell would you fix something that wasn't broken to begin with? Part of what made Knuckles satisfyingly different, but still in line with the idea of speed, was that split-second decision-making of which you had to decide which emerald piece you'd go after. Knuckles still had speedy gameplay aspects, but that speed was utilized differently. Now, you could be running around near a collectible, you could collect the end of the level faster, but this radar arbitrarily restricts how you would play the stage outside of getting lucky and finding things outside of the intended order. That being said, Wild Canyon is small enough as a stage where that really isn't an issue, and that theme of it not really being an insane problem persists for most stages like Pumpkin Hill. However, when you get to stages like Death Chamber or Meteor Herd, sometimes you're just blindly running around hoping your radar picks something up. I will say now that as an adult, the treasure hunting stages, at least on the Knuckles side of the field, are fine. They're not as fun or as good as the SA1 versions, but they're not as bad as I remember them being as a kid. I had a good amount of fun for the most part. However, what is far worse than I remember is the mech levels. Again, as of this point in the script, I've done the hero levels, so Tails is our focus. These levels just go on for way too long and are just audio overload. Incessant beeping noises that drown out the music, stupid enemy placement to where they just drop on your head from above, forcing you to take damage and hearing rings fly everywhere on top of all the beeping, and a mech that seems to move like molasses. I wish the complaints ended there, as on top of moving way slower than Gamma did, they also control way worse. Mission Street is actually painful to my ears. There's a point where I was platforming and the jet engines that are bombing Tails are just screeching with almost no end in sight. I genuinely felt that I had to take my headphones off since the audio was that unpleasant. I don't like this camera angle. There's just something just obliterating my eardrums just right now. It just sounds like a jet engine going off. What is this audio? Oh, it actually is a jet engine. It actually just straight up is a jet. The mech Tails uses also slows down like crazy when moving up a slope, so those windy paths in Mission Street just make an already slow playstyle even slower. What upsets me most about this is the fact that they already did this gameplay style pretty damn well in Sonic Adventure 1. Gamma had a shootout style of gameplay that was still in line with the overall theme of going fast back in Sonic Adventure 1. I don't understand how anyone felt this was better. All you had to do, essentially, was make that gameplay style more refined. Instead, it got bogged down and had its audio destroyed. Speaking of audio being destroyed, this game has some of the worst audio balancing I've ever seen in my entire life. In most cutscenes, you cannot hear anything anyone is saying since the music is so damn loud. Thankfully, the music in this game is awesome, but when Knuckles is barely audible over the soundtrack, it kinda takes me out.
You just don't know when to give up, do you?
What are you talking about? That emerald's mine.
Out of sheer curiosity, I fired up the Dreamcast version, and it seems the audio balancing is better there. There's still some instances of characters being hard to hear, like Shadow in the early part of the story.
Shadow. I'm the world's ultimate life form. There's no time for games. Farewell.
But even where the audio is still harder to hear, it's still slightly better than the GameCube version, from at least what I heard. Except for Eggman, you're not hearing that dude no matter which version he's talking in.
I came here following the signal from the emerald.
And for the most part, that's all she wrote. You go through the incredibly enjoyable Sonic stages with some decent treasure hunting stages and the infinitely worse mech stages. All fun and games for the most part. That is until you get to the end of the hero story. As soon as Knuckles gets to Death Chamber, the entire game essentially nosedives to being pretty annoying at worst on the hero side. Death Chamber is just a series of identical hallways and rooms where you desperately try to navigate yourself around just looking for some keys. I got lucky and found one out of order, but even then the level took close to 10 minutes. I'm fine with slowing the game down, but when it's uninteresting levels that feel like they're just looping, it makes things feel even more monotonous than they already are. Eternal Engine as Tails is genuinely one of my least favorite levels in the game. It goes on far too long and has all these annoying aspects of level design. Previously, firing at will was at least somewhat enjoyable. However, here, you could accidentally blow up a door that leads to the vacuum of space sucking you in and taking a life. Now then, I feel the need to inform you that the mechs don't lock on incredibly well, and just waggling your aiming cursor all over the place often feels like the most reliable way to aim. That directly flies in the face of this level's design, not to mention those stupid artificial chaos enemies that are just waiting behind doors to hit you. Sure, once you're familiar with the level, these can be avoided, but if my first playthrough is just me tiptoeing through the stage while being bombarded with sounds, why would I even want to replay these to get good at them? They're not satisfying in the way the speed levels are, or the way that the treasure hunting levels are when you get a good run. It's just the worst gameplay style of the three by a large margin. Sonic's next level isn't really safe either. You're dealing with this crappy gravity mechanic that can really throw your controls for a loop. The homing attack can also be a bit finicky in this game, and while in other stages it just felt like a minor setback, on Crazy Gadget it feels more like an actual hindrance sometimes, especially when fighting artificial chaos. Once you get the hang of the level, it's actually pretty cool, but I don't like when Sonic games mess with your controls. Final Rush, as previously mentioned, is a great level, but that level is sandwiched in between a brainless fight with Tails against Eggman and the final fight against Shadow, which is a cool set piece, don't get me wrong, but it's just as underwhelming as all the other boss fights in the Sonic Adventure sub-series, with a camera that likes to play some funny games. All in all, the hero story is good. It doesn't reach the peaks of SA1 for me so far, but it doesn't ever dip into the territory of being straight up bad. Even though I don't like the mech levels, I think Sonic and Knuckles are fun enough that it's worth sitting through them. Meanwhile, other games have aspects so bad, I wouldn't even sit through them to get to the good parts, if that makes sense. I don't know, maybe I'm just used to Tails after all these years, even though I don't like him that much. So now on to the dark story. Dr. Eggman storms Iron Gate, guns blazing, and it's actually really cool. It also starts off with a more than tolerable mech level I think is actually better than Tails' first level. Dry Lagoon for Rouge is also a pretty good time with the same qualities as Knuckles' first stage, compact and easy to traverse but still a good playground for her abilities. I also really like the turtles in the stage. Sand Ocean is lame as all hell, and Tails' version is far better, but this brings up a weird issue I have with a lot of the mech levels, as well as Death Chamber and Egg Quarters in Rouge's case. Why do these levels repeat layouts and set pieces so damn often? There was genuinely a moment where I thought I had accidentally looped back on the original path I took during Sand Ocean, despite the fact I know most of these levels are pretty linear. Weapons Bed has similar issues and consequently doesn't have much to write home about other than the fact that you can blow up fighter jets that are actively flying, but even at the start I just felt like this was a slightly worse hero story. Shadow even fights the same boss Sonic does, which some might say is to show off the Hedgehog's similarities, but no, just give me a different boss for the love of God, or why not show off Shadow escaping where he was being stored as a stage. Instead we just get some rehashed boss concept that follows immediately after a mech level, which even at their peak of being fun are still clunky to control, with audio that I literally cannot stop complaining about. Thankfully though, Eggman is what I'd consider my favorite mech stage in the game in Cosmic Wall. The level uses the lower gravity to make the mech actually gain altitude when hovering, which isn't reinventing the wheel, but it does a lot to remove some grievances I have with the way these mechs control, especially when they jump. And yeah, I've mentioned that I don't like the treasure hunting levels as much in this game as I do in Sonic Adventure 1 in general. However, Security Hall, damn, this level is just straight up fun. I don't know what it is about them, but the way the emeralds appear in the level and the way that they're rendered just looks so appealing to me, especially when I was a kid. This level is also compact enough that hunting doesn't feel like me running around begging my radar to pick up something, while still allowing me enough space to use Rouge's moveset in a fun, liberating way. Genuinely a blast, and it stands toe-to-toe with some of the SA1 treasure hunting levels for me. However, and I know I'm skipping ahead a bit in the dark story, Mad Space is one of the single worst levels I've ever played in a Sonic game. The stupid gravity mechanic in this level is just awful. Sometimes when holding down a direction on these planets, Rouge will just run in circles. It's even worse when you just want to jump off the planet and fly off, and the only way to do it consistently is to come to a rocket, fly out of the planet's orbit, then go about your way. Combine that with the godforsaken radar nerf, and you get one of the least fun Sonic levels ever. I have nothing nice to say about this stage. I do have nice things to say about the racing stages Rouge and Tails go through though. They're a cute distraction and last minutes at most, nothing really to complain about here. Lastly, I want to talk about some of Shadow's levels. I've already mentioned his opening boss fight isn't my cup of tea, but other than Radical Highway and Skyrail, I don't think Shadow's stages actually compete in terms of quality with Sonic's levels much. White Jungle isn't as good as Sonic's version of the level, despite still being a good bit of fun, and Final Chase has these awful green tubes that are just so janky it's crazy. It makes speed too much of a liability, but even if you're not going fast, they can just decide to crap out on you anyway. Shadow also feels strangely underrepresented due to this. Radical Highway and Skyrail are cool, unique stages to Shadow compared to Sonic, but his other two levels are just worse versions of levels Sonic gets to play on. Final Rush is an incredible stage, Final Chase is not. The Dark Story just feels like it needed a lot more polish to bring it up to snuff. As it stands, there's some pretty high highs in the Dark Story, but some absurdly low lows, and nowhere near enough Shadow levels. Can you tell I like Shadow? I know the idea is that every character's counterpart in terms of gameplay is meant to add to the total amount of levels per playstyle rather than per character. Let's break it down then. Each character pair, meaning pairs of characters with the same gameplay style, for example Shadow and Sonic, have about 10 stages. I think this was a really bad idea. Let's look at this game's older brother, aka my GOAT, Sonic Adventure 1. Sonic takes up the vast majority of game time, with the rest of his characters paling in comparison to his amount of stages individually. Now then, I'd love to spend more time with some of these characters, especially Tails, Knuckles, and Gamma, but you know what Sonic Adventure 1 did right? Characters that intentionally slowed the pace were still quick in their campaigns. Big and Amy really do not take much time to finish at all. 2D games inherently have less things to consider, so it's far easier to allow all of these characters to run through the same levels in something like Sonic Mania or Sonic Origins. However, now with these characters not only having more divide in their movesets, like Knuckles being able to dig as well as swapping to the 3D plane, it becomes harder to just allow characters to all run through the same stages without modifying them. Sonic Adventure recognizes this and still keeps up the pace by adjusting the screen time each character has. You would rather walk away from a game wanting more than wishing it stopped sooner. In the cases of Amy, Tails, Knuckles, and Gamma, that's exactly how I felt. I wanted to see more of those playstyles. In Amy's case, she wasn't allowed to affect the pace of the game for long since they make her campaign quick but different enough to justify existing without seriously detracting from the pace of the game. She may not be able to play the same levels as Sonic, but her inclusion doesn't take away from the fact that this game is a Sonic game, and usually people want to go fast because it's over so soon. Knuckles and Tails are also really fast in Sonic Adventure 1, just in a different way. Tails flying through levels and taking these giant rings as shortcuts isn't just a way to show Tails flying for spectacle. Typically, Tails was always seen as the easy mode in the 2D part of the franchise, and part of that was because he could fly, skipping some platforming. Well, the game translates that perfectly. There's still the freedom of carving your own path, but through an upgrade as well as skillful flying, you can jet to the other side of a stage. It's nowhere near as involved as Sonic to go fast, but it provides that signature speed and exhilaration of the franchise while staying in line with what makes Tails unique. Same with Knuckles. Although I've already spoken a bit about it, he's not doing what Sonic and Tails are doing. He's not just getting to the end of a level, but watching this guy glide from end to end of a stage and the sheer verticality of some of these stages, which serve as really cool jumping off points to start a fat glide, provide yet again a different style of gameplay that keeps things fresh while keeping in line with the main gimmick Sonic games have. Speed. Well, Tails, and less so Knuckles, aren't really designed like that anymore, as I've mentioned, so their sudden jump in screen time means that the pace breaking is actually in the game more than the speed. Tails, Eggman, Rouge, and Knuckles take up roughly 20 of the 31 stages. While there are some definitely good stages amongst all the characters, I personally feel that you just don't spend enough time actually doing speed stages. The other characters in Sonic Adventure 1 also combined have more screen time than Sonic, but I feel that Sonic having the longest individual campaign makes that feel less in your face. Also, as previously mentioned, most of the other gameplay styles other than Big and Amy still had a fast enough pace that it made it a somewhat easier pill to swallow. Anyway, moving on with the final campaign, the Ark is revealed to have been planned to slam into Earth by Gerald Robotnik's diary as revenge for what Gun and the government did to Maria. This prompts both sides to work together in order to stop the end of the world, except for Shadow, as this is all he wanted. This means we use all the characters in one big hybrid stage to get to the core of the Ark. In a shocking twist, Knuckles and Rouge have the most entertaining sections to me. Shadow gets a cool boss fight against the Bio-Lizard, but doesn't actually participate in getting to the core with the rest of the team. Sonic gets a small section that feels kinda herky-jerk, and the mech part isn't much fun at all due to artificial dickhead over here. I'm pretty god-awful at this giant last level, but the spectacle and team-up is pretty cool. It's handled far better than how Sonic Lost World would go on to handle a Sonic and Eggman team-up. I also think it's pretty damn funny that Amy whining about being left out suddenly leads to her deciding to stop and to ask Shadow for his help, which triggers a memory of Maria asking him to help the people of Earth, suddenly making Shadow's intentions do a complete 180. This leads to Shadow fighting the Bio-Lizard when Sonic and Knuckles stumble across it, and well, the concept and significance of the fight is actually better than the fight. It's a pretty easy fight all things considered, but giant mecha death lizard that was supposed to be Shadow's prototype is kinda damn cool. I also really like his design. The gills make it look creepy and gross, while still making it look capable of firing a hole into the sun or something, you know? Anyway, after Shadow fights the Bio-Lizard, we get what is possibly the most iconic supersonic fight of all time next to Perfect Chaos: Final Hazard. We got the iconic music in Live and Learn, a dope space background, Sonic and Shadow talking like it's a crossover. Oh yeah, it's fan service time. I don't need to say much about this fight, it's referenced time and time again. The music is referenced time and time again because it's so damn good and so damn cool. It's a spectacle through and through, and 20 years later, it's still just as cool. What isn't cool is the fact that as an adult, I noticed the poor Bio-Lizard is getting pegged by the Ark on his way to slam into the Earth face first.
Gerald, what the fuck, bro?
The day is saved, Shadow is potentially dead, and yada yada yada, that's Sonic Adventure 2. What did I think? Well, I think Sonic Adventure 2 is an odd title. I'll go out of the way now and say that, yeah, I still think Sonic Adventure 1 is a better game. However, I don't want to get it twisted that I dislike this game. I'm incredibly critical of the games I play. However, that doesn't mean I outright didn't enjoy them. There are aspects of this game that when spoken about in isolation, I don't like. The mechs, like I mentioned, Shadow's gameplay role, the emphasis on evenly distributing the time between all three playstyles, you name it. A lot of those gripes hold this game back from its true potential. But in saying that, I think it's a testament to this game's quality that even some of the worst mech and treasure hunting levels didn't make me want to put this game down. When this game is good, god damn is it good, and when it's not, it's really not. But surrounding those peaks and valleys is a game that just brings its own vibe to the table, even when comparing it to its predecessor. Sonic Adventure 2 has the grandest sense of scope the franchise saw until this point. Sonic Adventure made things feel like an adventure using hub worlds, which I loved. Sonic Adventure 2 does it with the ever-changing stages and the higher stakes. The arc slamming into the planet at a glance is a greater threat to the entire world than Perfect Chaos obliterating Station Square. The Chow Garden is also a timeless feature in my opinion. The juxtaposition of racing through stages as fast as possible to get things to help you slowly raise up Chow that you can align to either the dark or light side is just a really cool concept that provides a nice change of pace at your beck and call. Fans of these titles usually love the Chow Garden, and I'm no different. The music, the soft way the characters interact with these little guys, it all makes the world feel so much more realized and gives some fun distractions. Speaking of the world being realized, I thought it was really cool that when the planet was being threatened, the game panned to what was obviously different countries. I think in a lot of ways, Sonic Adventure 2 nails the overall summer action blockbuster vibe it feels like this game was going for. I also think if you're just replaying the speed stages, you'll have a blast, or even some of the better treasure hunting levels, but as a whole, the game of SA2 has some jarring flaws that hold it back from being the single best Sonic game as some say, because I truly think that when people are remembering the game, they're remembering the game's high highs while forgetting some of the game's low lows. This is all just a really wordy way to say I have mixed feelings about Sonic Adventure 2. I will always come back to this game for the stuff I love, but goddamn am I gonna bitch about what I don't love. From my perspective, I think Sonic Adventure 2 is overrated, even though I actually like it a lot. Despite all my complaining, I grew up hearing that this game was hands down the best 3D Sonic game year after year after year. When it comes to living up to the GOAT title, yeah, no man, it's overrated if this is supposedly the best game the franchise has to offer. Thank you guys so much for stopping by for this video. If you're interested, as always, check out some of the other Sonic related stuff I've put out. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys next time where I see how many suspiciously wet Knuckles plushies I can send to Chrissy Gnome's husband before she shoots me.